I see a lot of people pretending that what is happening in Syria right now is some organic, spontaneous outcome of the so-called Arab Spring or the Syrian Revolution. Let's be honest, my friends. We have an Al-Qaeda linked ruler in Damascus whose rise was tolerated, even enabled, because he was useful to a lot of players, including Israel. Not in spite of his ideology, but rather because of it. Think about how this looks from Israel's point of view. You had the old regime in Damascus, whatever we think about it, which at least kept the map horizontally stable. One state, one army, one flag, a complex mosaic of sects and ethnicities, but a central authority that could still claim to represent the whole. Israel spent years weakening that state, politically through isolation and sanctions, militarily through repeated airstrikes, and on the southern front, even cooperating with Jolani's group on the border, treating his fighters, letting them use that area as a rear base. So first step, you erode the old centralized Syria, you bleed its army, you attack its infrastructure, you box it in internationally, you tolerate, even help the rise of jihadist formations in sensitive border areas. Now we arrive at the current reality. Jolani in Damascus, sitting on the top of an Al-Qaeda-linked power structure. Why was this acceptable to many capitals? Because an openly jihadist government in Syria does something very useful. It cuts the country vertically. It turns minorities and different communities into isolated columns of fear. Alawites, Christians, Druze, Shia, even many Sunnis who don't buy into this ideology, all living under the shadow of a regime that comes from the same school as Al-Qaeda and behaves like it. This is perfect if you are Israel and you want pretexts ready on the shelf. You have an Al-Qaeda branded regime in Damascus, you have massacres against minorities, you have videos, sentiments, sectarian rhetoric. Tomorrow, if you decide to step deeper into Syrian territory, you don't come as an occupier, you come as the protector of minorities. Look, you say, we cannot sit idly while Druze are slaughtered, while Christians are terrorized, while this terrorist regime consolidates power in the south. We need a security belt, we need a buffer zone, we need to protect vulnerable communities, right? You see how clean that is. First, you help create the conditions, directly or indirectly, for Jolani's rise. Then you point at the monster you helped nurture and say, see, this is why we have to intervene. Let's remember, my friend, Jolani's men didn't grow in a vacuum. They got logistics, money, medical treatment, and safe rear areas from different sides of the border over the years. Everyone knew who they are. No one thought they were a charity. And now these same forces are in government in Damascus, running security services, running checkpoints, running prisons, and many other things, right? They are doing what Al-Qaeda-linked groups always do, cracking down on minorities, cleansing certain areas, enforcing their ideology, threatening anyone who doesn't fit their model of true believer. So when they commit massacres, those massacres are political capital for Israel. Because each atrocity becomes another argument. We warned you. Look at what's happening in Sueda. Look at that village. Look at this church, that shrine, that community. We have to act. We have to set up a security zone to protect them. And that security zone, of course, is inside Syrian territory, not inside Israel, right? So let's connect the dots, my friends. You weaken the old state. You allow, even support, Jolani's network to grow, especially in the south. You watch as this network captures Damascus and turns the whole system into an Al-Qaeda-flavored regime. That regime turns its guns inward, especially on minorities and dissenters. You then dress up your own intervention as a humanitarian mission. We are here to protect the Druze, Christians, whoever is under threat. On TV, this looks like compassion, right? But on the map, this is expansion. Deeper buffer zones, more military outposts, more intelligence assets, more leverage over what is left of Syria. And the beauty of it from Israeli side is that they can always blame the victim. It's not our fault we are inside Syria. Look at Jolani, look at his massacres, look at his ideology, etc., etc., etc. This is why I insist you cannot analyze Israel's current posture in Syria without looking at the sequence. Weaken the old regime, tolerate and assist jihadist groups when they serve immediate tactical goals, live with an Al-Qaeda-linked government in Damascus because it keeps Syria fractured and hated, and then present yourself as the only rational actor who can protect minorities by carving out temporary zones of control. The end result is always the same. Syria loses land, loses sovereignty, and loses its social coherence. Israel gains depth, gains pretexts, and gains more room to maneuver. So when I hear talk about humanitarian corridors and minority protection as justification for deeper incursions into Syrian territory, I don't take it at face value. Sorry. I look at who helped create the monster in Damascus, who benefited from the fall of the previous state, and who is now cashing in on the chaos they helped design. Because this is not just an accident of history, it is a strategy. Use an Al-Qaeda-linked regime to tear Syria vertically, then step in as the savior of the victims and stay as the owner of those so-called buffer zones. This is the story of Syria.